I'm going to just throw it on to you and say thank you, Paul, for being here. And could you introduce yourself a little bit to everybody who might not know you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Don. And I appreciate it. Thanks, Maddie, and everybody for being here. First of all, I want it to be conversational. So if you're muted and you want to jump in, just unmute yourselves and jump in and out. Cause I do, networking is about exchanges of, conversation. So best you can do that. But, and before I start, how many of you are seniors? You would just show of hands on here. So I hope you guys are hanging in there because I'm really sorry. This is a cruddy way to end for maybe more years of school. My daughter's a high school senior right now, so no prom, no graduation, maybe no fall school. She's not sure where the future goes. So I know it's got to be particularly tough, especially to be separated from your friends for end of year ceremonies and all of that. So I do expect the 5-year reunions of a lot of high schools and colleges are going to be insanely great because of this. So you do have something to look forward to, and at least you had this 4 years to establish the relationships that you have. So but I just want to acknowledge it's got to kind of suck to end your years of college going through this. So on that note, myself, I've been, as Don had indicated, I think we've been working together. It has been 5 years. It was September of 2015. I took a job as the president and CEO of the MetroWest Chamber of Commerce. And basically left that job about a year ago in March. Prior to the chamber, I had actually been self-employed. I run a company called Contexed, and Contexed is basically an amalgam of consulting plus executive education. So what I do for a living is basically help predominantly technology companies, but I help companies of all kinds with their strategic planning, go-to-market strategies. So I'm a product manager, product marketing person by function. But by experience, I've actually worked most of my career. I did my MBA back in 1997 at Babson. Most of the years since 1997, I've been working as a consultant to tech companies. So I've helped a lot of startups and have gone through a lot of recessions too, by the way. I graduated college in 1991 during the beginning of a recession, and I actually started a business then. So my first job out of college was actually the year before, my senior year. My friend and I started and ran a bartending school. So my senior year, I was self-employed. My first year out, my partner and I worked together, and then I bought him out. And then I worked for 4 years self-employed during a tough economy in the early 1990s. And then I went back to graduate school and transitioned from being a bartending instructor to being a tech company marketing consultant. So there's a lot of great things to look forward to. And if things feel dire for your job track right now, I think what makes now 2020 more difficult than the recessions that I've seen is the businesses themselves don't even know what's happening and how yet. I think they're trying to struggle with how to bring back their current employees. I know, for example, I reached out to TJX, just curious about their internship programs, and it sounds like everything's on hold this summer with even our largest of the large employers here. So it's a tough economy, but I will say this, those of you that want to start businesses, or if you want to go in and add a tremendous amount of value to companies, even this skill, your comfort working remotely, you're already ahead of probably more than half of the workforce that you'll be competing with as you continue to look for things in the market and continue to progress. But anyway, so my background's sort of all over the place, but I summarize it by basically saying I help companies basically develop products or services and help them grow and sell those products. So as a marketing professional, I understand value. I understand what it is they're bringing to the market. I understand how to price, which is basically the capture of the value in dollar terms. And I understand strategy. I look at the big picture. So I intentionally wanted to call my company Context, because so much of how we operate really depends on the environment in which we're operating. My father was a strategic planner for a big company, an aerospace company. So he actually got laid off in the late 80s and had to reinvent himself very late in his career. And in a lot of ways, he's my business role model, because he, in later stage in life, basically got certified and became a financial planner. He had no background in it whatsoever. And he retired very successfully as a private practice financial planner. But, even before the COVID and all of this, there's always disruptions. And one of the things I've always tried to do with my career and now in my teaching and in my volunteer work is really kind of show that, essentially things, as much as they change, they do stay the same. The skills that you have are going to be valuable, in some cases even more valuable than you think right now. So I hope you're all feeling optimistic as much as things feel kind of strange heading into the summer without being able to see each other like this. So on that note, the topic for today was talking about networking, and it's a virtual networking session. So to tell you, sort of share some tips and tricks about networking virtually, but I also wanted to put a different spin on it as well and talk about how do you network virtually, right? The fact that we might not be, getting together with people in large groups and shaking hands and doing the things like we did during the mocktail mixer might get even more challenging. So I wanted to kind of talk to you as prospective employees, or if you're going to graduate school, as you think about the relationships you need to build, or you're entering the trades, or if you're going into the military, whatever your next step is going to be, your ability to connect with people like this is, as I said, it's becoming extremely valuable. And I think, my goal for today is really to kind of share and exchange some ideas about how to do networking more effectively, whether you're doing it online or in person, and then kind of share some experiences. I'd love to talk to you. Obviously, you've had internships, you've had some experience, maybe some of you have employment offers already. Talk about how that came to be, share some of your experiences with each other, and I can kind of share with you some of mine as well. And then lastly, kind of think about, what's one thing you can take away from today. So I want to make sure that the time is useful, and just kind of give you a homework assignment, like you need that right now, I know, but just do one thing as you walk away from here to really make it actionable and valuable to you. That'll make me feel good that we're actually spending time on the right thing. So before I proceed, I also want to be clear, any questions? So I see I've got the group chat open. If you do have questions along the way, since it's just a relatively small group, I just say, raise your hand and open your mic up. I'd rather keep it conversational, but every once in a while I'll glance over there. And Dawn or Wendy, don't be afraid to just say, hey, we have a question over here if I'm forgetting about that part of it. So again, mic's open. I'm curious from your perspective, what do you see as networking if you had to define it? And you can kind of give me a definition of it, but more importantly, give me an example. Like what are things you've been doing to network pretty much throughout your college careers? Yeah, Dennis, why don't you jump in, and then Robbie?
Okay.
So networking, for example, could be, getting to know Wendy and Jill and all of them, and kind of through them, I found the Washington Center. And through the Washington Center, I found kind of mentors and all that sort of thing. And through the mentors, they found me jobs I can apply for. So it could be one person to connect to 5 more people. So that's what I see as networking.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Wendy and Dawn. That's power networking right there. So that's you knew where to go. Robbie? Yep.
All right. So as far as networking goes on my end, one of my favorite things I've heard from other people is that networking doesn't have to be with doesn't only have to be with these much larger people in terms of stature, but rather just your friends as well. And through communicating with your friends, you're able to, open the door to gain more friends, and through that, more opportunities for when you're looking for a job, and lo and behold, you encounter somebody who might just have the opportunity for you. And that's how I picture networking, in that networking is such a big part of everyone's lives, not just those looking for a job, because it's always happening, I feel.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and you talk about that. It's not necessarily the direct relationship you have, but it's that secondary relationship. It's the friend of the friend. It's the person that Wendy or Dawn or their office can put you in touch with.
Exactly.
And that's when you look at social science, that's exactly it. If you look at the number of jobs people get by a contact that they have in LinkedIn, it's not the first tier contacts that usually hire them. It's the second and third tier in the network, because we tend to surround ourselves. Our primary network are the people that we know and love that are a lot like us, right? So it's sort of a homogeneous group. But then once you get beyond that, now you're getting into a whole different outer circle to get more. Actually, I broke my own rule. I was excited that we have a relatively manageable group here, because I would like to go around. If everybody could please introduce yourselves. I'd love to hear what you were studying, where you're headed, if you have a job opportunity, or what you're looking for. So maybe give me an idea of what you'd like to take away from this, or how it might be useful to you moving forward. So I guess, why don't we go alphabetically, since that's how you're all tiled or arranged on my screen, at least. So I have Olivia, then Matt, then Dennis, and Mackenzie.
All right. So I'm Olivia. I'm a criminology major and a political science minor. So currently I'm a junior. Next year I'll be a senior. I currently have an internship right now, which has been super beneficial, but obviously COVID has kind of made things like that change. So in terms of what I'm looking to get out of this would definitely be to kind of have better skills when I'm in those professional settings, or not even in those professional settings, when I meet someone who could possibly help me with a future opportunity, how to kind of go about those conversations and kind of sell myself, I guess.
Great. Just sorry, before you jump to you, Maddie, would you consider yourself, do you tend to be more introverted and shy, or do you consider yourself extroverted, or sort of a mix?
I think I'm a little bit of a mix. I think my friends would say I'm an extrovert, but when I'm in like certain situations with people I don't know, I can be introverted in terms of like trying to introduce myself or something like that.
Sounds like me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maddie. I am a senior political science major with a minor in sociology, and I'm also the student government president, and I work in the student involvement office. I'm planning on pursuing a job in higher education. It's been a little bit difficult as of late trying to find a job opportunity. But I mean, speaking of networks, I applied for a job at Mount Wachusett, and I just so happened to talk to Dawn about it before a meeting that we were in together. And she knows the hiring manager. So, I mean, I found, and this kind of goes into the earlier question of like networking, is I found that it's not always like those big mocktail mixers where it's a room full of people to network, but it's also, I was able to develop my relationship with Dawn by, like small conversations and like, just popping into the office. And I think that those are just as critical to networking as kind of those bigger networking designed events. But that's kind of a little bit about me. I would consider myself an extrovert. I don't have an issue going up to people and talking to them, introducing myself. But I think out of what I'm looking to get out of this presentation is figuring out how, like, what's the appropriate way to kind of tap into your network once you've developed and kind of like ask, do you know anyone, that works here, or can you help me connect with anyone? I usually like people to ask me for favors and not the other way around. So I get very uncomfortable kind of in my view, kind of asking for things. But I know people have told me it's like, well, I've given my 4 years to Framingham State. It's time to kind of cash out of the ATM and kind of cash in some favors. But I think that's what I'm looking to get out of it.
Okay, excellent. That's good. Yeah, asking can be hard for sure. Yeah, Dennis.
Hey, what's up, y'all? So I'm Dennis. I'm a senior at Framingham State. I'm a criminology major and psychology minor. What I'm kind of like hoping to get out of this is basically like after I've developed those, relationship with the like mentors and all those sort of things, like how do I keep the conversation going after a while? So like usually I'll be like, hey, hope it's all's well. But like after a couple months, I'm like, what do I say to them? Like, do I send them an article? Like, how do I keep the relationship kind of strong? Because after a while, I'm like, oh, I haven't heard from this person in a while. So like, how do I keep that going? I guess I was interning with FEMA this semester, and because of the whole COVID-19, my internship was suspended. It was a big bummer because I was actually kind of the last 2 months, I was hoping to build more relationship with some of the people I met and like the whole networking thing. Through FEMA, I've met people, like I met the head of FEMA for Region 1, and through him, I met someone from TSA, and through them, I met like an ATF. So like the whole networking thing, I want to learn how to like keep the conversation going after a couple months.
It sounds like you got the hard part done first. Those are some pretty big organizations you're connecting with, so that's good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's really it.
Great. Mackenzie, you're next on my. I don't know how you guys have rendered pictures, so I'm just going to read through as I go down. So.
Hi, so I'm Mackenzie. I'm a first year. I'm a double major in history and English, and I'm hoping to go to law school after I graduate. So one of the things that I really want to get out of this is I'm an introvert, so it's really hard for me to talk to people and to express how badly I want to go to law school. And like going to law school is a lot about like building connections with people and getting those recommendation letters. So like what I want to learn is how to be an introvert while also still making connections and talking to people.
Excellent. You stated that you're an introvert boldly, so that's good. That's a good step. Awesome. Michelle? We all must contribute.
Sorry about that. I'm a career counselor at Framingham State. So I'm just here to enjoy the conversation and take notes. And I'm actually really excited that a few of you have already mentioned that with networking, you're using your connections that you already have.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of my golden rule. It doesn't have to be going out and necessarily just meeting new people. You know, the people who are around you, who care about you, that's your inner circle, and they're fantastic to tap into. And then somebody had, Dennis, was it you who were saying, you know, how do I follow up? What do I do after I'm a few months in? I love, if I've been networking with a student, if they follow up with me and tell me some of the steps they actually took. So it could be X amount of time, but I love to hear that they took some of the ideas we talked about and put them into practice. So if you're not doing that already, that's fabulous when people you network with hear how you've taken that advice and run with it.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. All right, Robbie, a little bit more about you.
Mute myself. Yes. Hello, my name is Robert Johnson Jr. Most people call me Rob, Robbie, or Robbie. And just I'm saying that both with IE and Y endings. I'm the vice president of Comic Book Club, was president last semester. I'm a arts and features editor on the Gatepost.
Oh, nice.
And I am also a professional writing intern for Career Services. And even though the experience has been extremely marred by this whole situation, it's still something I greatly enjoy, and hey, gives me a reason to get out of bed in the morning. So,
Awesome.
my designated, well, where I want to be after all this is, you know, working for a newspaper or a magazine. But what I want to take away from this meeting most of all is, and I can't stay for the whole thing because Comic Book Club is tugging me over for an event that's happening tonight, is just more effective ways to network, both in person and in situations like this, from afar online. I am very much so an extrovert, that much I can say with confidence, and I'm just here to learn and just here to learn lots.
Awesome. Great.
Thank you.
All right, Kiara. You're muted now, so just want to make sure.
Sorry,
Okay.
I'm so sorry. Yeah.
That's okay.
I was actually chatting because I have to run
Oh, okay.
and for my children, but I'm Kiara and I'm a senior, and I'm so glad to see you here, Paul. And I was like hoping that maybe I can review this session after, because everyone is asking like the best questions that I'm like, yes, that's so true. So I totally want to know the answers. But Mike, I also want to go to law school, so I think it was Olivia who said she wanted to.
I do, but Mackenzie said it too.
Mackenzie, thank you. Sorry, I'm looking at you. Yeah, so Mackenzie did. So like totally connect with me after, and I could definitely help you like walk through the steps. So you got something out of this, you know, whole networking event.
Nice.
And then also, Paul, my question was that like how, because typically like in a mocktail mixer, you can have like one-on-one conversations with people. And I'm wondering like, how do you get that value from a platform like this, if it's even possible, or
Good
yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are learning how to do this. I mean, you can do breakout rooms. You can actually have one-on-ones. An interesting parallel. My daughter, as I said, is a high school senior. She's been playing hockey since she was 5 years old. So we pretty much haven't gone to church since my daughter's gone to hockey. And so we've just reconnected with a church that we had been with years ago. And interestingly, they're doing Zoom sessions. So they do the service on a Sunday, and then they do breakout rooms for the parishioners to get together in smaller groups to talk about the sermon and talk about what they kind of, you know, how they're feeling and all that. So it's a way of community building. But I can absolutely see that as a networking tool. That's one of the things I'm kind of pushing the Chamber of Commerce. And I want to see organizations that have historically done that relearn, you know, formats. Because what I'm going to get to today is I don't think what we do is any different. I think the channels we're using are going to be different. So of course she had to drop out right now, but I'll send her a recording of it. But to me, it's a great question. And Kiara did reach out a couple weeks ago. I know we're connected on LinkedIn now too. So, you know, staying in touch with people that, you know, you think can at least refer you to the right places is a key. But I think from my perspective, this technology for so many people is new. And even the platforms themselves are experimenting with how all of these new users are using it. Because don't forget, until COVID hit, you know, if you think about sort of the typical progression of business, I'm going to go this way. I have to do a reverse of my mirror image here. You know, when a business starts or an industry starts, there aren't that many people using something. And then over time, it takes off and it really scales. And this has just exploded the use of video technology. Most of the people in an early market, when it's down here, are technology savvy people, tend to be younger. They tend to be different, you know, one profile. So I think what we're going to find, and this is where it's a great opportunity for each of you, watch where this goes. Because companies themselves, actually one of the places I went to try to get some information for today, the Society for Human Resource Managers, SHRM, they've got a global organization. They certify human resources professionals. They basically said 34% of employers did not have an emergency preparedness plan. They did a massive, you know, multi-thousand company interview, and that just blew me away. That, you know, obviously most of the world is smaller business, but the fact that a third of companies weren't thinking about catastrophic change. Because we don't, we get caught up. We have to make money. We have to, you know, get a marketing brochure out. We have to, you know, order supplies, whatever it is. But for large companies in particular to be caught off guard, your generation's experience with technology and your ability to connect with people virtually, I think is going to start leading a completely different world. I forget who said it, but I heard somebody mention that the future hasn't changed. COVID just accelerated our path to the future. And I think in some ways you guys are in a perfect position to capitalize on that. So Mark, Mackenzie jumped back in, so Mark moved over. So Mark, it looks like you're next on my list here, and then Emma.
Yes. Well, I'm Mark Haskell. I'm a freshman. I'm a international business and marketing major and marketing minor. And for recent job progression, I have an interview for SILD on Thursday. And I am kind of prepared, but not as much as I should be.
Okay. What have you done to say that you're kind of, and where do you feel the biggest gap is right now?
The biggest gap right now is how to feel completely prepared for what questions they're going to ask, because they might be different for every single person. And I might need to refer to past applicants and their questions. Mm-hmm. As something for me to feel prepared with.
And you're gonna have to excuse my ignorance. Oh, sorry, I see Wendy waving over there.
I just wanted to say to Mark, please make an appointment with Career Services. This is our bread and butter. We can do a mock interview with you. We are very tied with the SILD organization. We are co-partners in like everything. So you can, after this, you can email careerservices@framingham.edu. I will get your contact information. We can get you definitely a mock interview. That will definitely help you. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome.
And I don't know what happened with my camera here. Can you hear me still?
Yeah,
oh, there we go. Yeah. For some reason, I just disappeared.
Mark know that if he goes on Starfish, he could get an appointment as early as tomorrow morning. I believe there's some openings. So, Mark, if you go on Starfish, like right after this presentation, you could make an appointment and get in there early tomorrow morning so you'd be fresh on. Did you say your interview's on Thursday?
Yes, Thursday at 2:30.
So you'll be fresh in your mind. So we want to get you in tomorrow.
Perfect, thank you.
And I have to ask, is that your house behind you, or what's the image that you're projecting?
Well, I do have many backgrounds. One being, it's Vienna, Austria. My prior one was Strasbourg, France. So I was like, I want to switch it now.
Nice.
Just go with travel instead.
Excellent. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm actually there instead.
So beautiful city. Okay, Emma, I think you're last up. Hello.
Hi, I'm Emma. I'm a sophomore early childhood education major with a psych concentration. I have never really done this before, so I'm kind of just like
awesome,
taking it all in, learning about what this whole thing is. So yeah.
This whole thing that is networking?
Yeah.
Okay. making sure we're on the same page. Yeah, great. Thank you. I'm glad you're here, and all good stuff. As I said, I can't remember, in response to one of you, to me, nothing has changed. You know, the channel, the media that we're using has changed as far as networking goes, but what's most important about networking hasn't. You know, this idea that we're basically trying to establish ourselves as, you know, a component of a valuable chain of people, right? And each of you has some unique value to offer to this community, right? And you get the privilege of being the center of the community when we talk about networking, because it starts with you, it starts with the relationships around you, and then it grows out from there. But the world is really comprised of networks, right? So not only as an individual, but the power of the people that you interact with is extremely valuable to other individuals and people too. So again, it's not necessarily knowing me that could be valuable, but maybe I happen to know somebody that's hiring or has a need for one of you down the road for a job. And that, to me, you know, is the fundamentals of what a network is. Ironically, you know, COVID, the way a virus spreads is by networking, right? I mean, we're kind of interacting with each other, but it shows you how powerful it can be if, you know, you've got a concentration of the right people at the right place. To get that kind of exposure and expansion very quickly. That's why tools like Facebook and LinkedIn and all the social tools really exploded a few years ago when they first came on, because again, it was that network effect, as they call it, that enabled it. Wearing my marketing hat for a minute, if you've had any basic marketing course, you might have heard of the 4 Ps of marketing. I always try to think about my networking if I were the product of what the company is trying to sell. So when we talk about the 4 Ps of marketing, the first P is product. And if you think about the fact that you represent something of value to somebody else, the only reason a business or a service exists is to create and exchange value, okay? So when we think about ourselves as a product that's being offered to, whether it's another school, whether it's an employer or a person, you know, we are basically the sort of fabrication of something of value that we're trying to transfer to somebody else. Now, when we think about price is a dollar figure we put on products, basically, that reflect the relative value to other things. So when you put a price on something, it's in exchange for something else. So there's an element of currency to your value as well, right? So you might be extremely valuable to somebody that wants to, well, as Kiara just offered to you, Mackenzie, I guess. Yes, thank you. So you actually, your tile moved on me, so I was looking. I was like, it wasn't Michelle. I know that. But yeah, she offered. You know, she can kind of share with you some information on applying to law school or thinking about law school. So this idea of relative value, certain members of that network will have a higher cost or higher value to you as you think about it as a price. Promotion. You can think about, that's the third P. Promotion is how we sort of advertise or get the word out about ourselves. And that's where you've got tremendous advocacy in the career services office with Dawn, with Wendy, and Jill and the team, because they really, your resume is part of your advertising or promotion. Your LinkedIn account profile is part of your promotion. Your transcript is part of your promotion, right? How you balance the activities of academics and social activities and things like that. That's all about the wrapper around you, right? So the promotion piece is a big part of it. And then place. Place is the fourth of the 4 Ps. Place is basically a distribution channel. So when we think about a product being sold, a retail store is a place, online is a place, right? The only thing that's changed in networking, as far as I'm concerned, is the channel or the place right now with post-COVID. But the essence of what makes you the product valuable, the essence of what makes your price relatively high or low based on the people you're interacting with, and how you get the word out about yourself hasn't changed at all. So to me, I think that's a big positive from all of this, is while the world feels very different, when it comes to networking, I don't think much is. In fact, I think technology has accelerated the ability to network more effectively. So as much as I love being the mocktail, doing the mocktail mixer and being the network navigator, the fact is the vast majority of follow-ups to those networking sessions were by email, by LinkedIn, by virtual or some kind of technological channel. Right. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, is that not a lot has changed from a traditional just, you know, getting in front of people and having a conversation, which I know can be very challenging for people. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. First, I'm going to pause there. Any questions on that concept? It's a simple model, but I'm a simple guy and I like marketing, so I always try to bring things back into my world a little bit. But we're all consumers, so I think people can generally relate well to the marketing analogy. When I was in undergraduate classes and starting my business, at the time there was a guy who was a kind of a self-help guru. He's still out there today. His name's Anthony Robbins or Tony Robbins. He's a very popular motivational speaker, charges thousands and thousands of dollars to go see him live and talk about things. But he's written a lot of books about success and what it takes to be successful. One of the things that, you know, I remember about his teaching, and I actually went online to look at it to refresh my memory about it, was this notion of rapport. Okay, when we talk about what's important about networking, it's establishing a rapport or a connection with people. And I think that if you think about that, how you connect with people, it's that feeling of commonality. What makes you feel comfortable sitting in this group with each of us now, right? We're all here trying to talk about the same thing. We might have differing levels of knowledge or experience with it, but we're establishing some kind of a relationship right now because we're basically all here for the same purpose, right? You can ask questions to establish rapport, but it's really, the rapport is that feeling that you get from the answer of those questions. So as we think about how you want to network or who you choose to network with, even if you're in a completely open social environment, sometimes it's random. So like when I'm doing the network navigating and we have a social event, you know, it might be just random, you know, bumping into people and just introducing yourself and asking why are they here, or what are they looking to get from the event. So there are different techniques you can use for networking, and I'll come back to those in a minute too. I also want to be sensitive to time. I presumed an hour for this. I do have time afterwards. I don't want to drag out your evenings either. So I'll definitely have a hard stop at 6, but if anybody wants to hang out afterwards, I can do that as well. To me, the best way to establish rapport, especially for the introverts or shy people in the group, it's to be curious. And to be a great networker, you have to be a great listener and a respectful listener. So when I think about listening, you know, everybody talks and you can hear somebody's voice, but an active listener is extremely valuable. I teach a class in product management, and when I teach that class, one of the comments I make to the students taking it is that, you know, when we go out and do field research, when we want to know what a user wants in a product or service that they're going to be using, it's not enough just to hear what they're saying. It's important to be an engaged listener. How is their tone of voice? Are they really dissatisfied with the product or an experience? Are they frustrated? Can you pick up subtleties in how they're communicating? Active listening is a really important skill in most of life, but in networking, it's extremely important because you're selling your product, right? And the best way you can sell your product is to understand that you have value and potential relevance to that other person. So when I talk about actively listening to somebody, I'm not just saying, you know, just here, oh, I traveled to this place last year and, you know, next year I'm doing an internship there. Think about what does that mean to you or what you have to offer to them, right? So the idea is when you're establishing a network relationship, you can have a strong tie or a weak tie to somebody. The strong ties tend to be our first tier connections, right? Our friends, our family, the first people we get to know. The weaker ties are typically through other people, but we can strengthen those ties through practice. So I think, Dennis, you were talking about follow-up. You know, how do I keep somebody engaged? Once I kind of cast that net, I've met somebody at an event, or this person referred me to that person. Absolutely, there are some best practices, like, you know, maybe put a flag in your calendar and say, look, every 3 months, every 6 months, I might just ping that person. Just to stay in front of them, say, hi, how you doing? COVID's a great excuse to get in front of people and just say, hey, you know, I know we're all kind of hunkering down right now. Hope you and your family are doing well. Just let them know you're thinking about them. That's all. That's one way to strengthen a tie in your network, is just showing that you care. When you're in a physical location with somebody and you're doing some cocktail, you know, networking, or like we do with the mocktail mixer, those ties are probably more about just establishing the connection. Don't worry about the strength of it yet. It's just putting 2 dots together on the network. And the best thing you can possibly do there is not push what you have to sell onto somebody, but pull what they might gain from knowing you into your head, right? So you have to do the hard work of figuring out how you're valuable or relevant to them. And the only way you can do that well is to listen to them. What is it that they're saying? What do they care about? Oh, that's interesting. I traveled there last year and I might be able to introduce them to somebody there that I met, or, you know, things like that. So when I talk about listening in this relationship exchange, listening is a very active sport. And I think it gives, in particularly shy people, a great opportunity to showcase, you know, there's a difference between being shy and being introverted, right? Introverted is you can tend to basically draw energy from being alone, as opposed to extroverts that draw energy from being in a crowd, right? So it's sort of how you draw your energy from the group. Shyness is that unwillingness or hesitance to go up to somebody and introduce yourself. And who knows if we're even going to be shaking hands anymore. I don't know if that's an appropriate way to greet people anymore. Honestly, you know, it's going to be interesting. So for me, you know, I was extremely introverted and shy. When I was teaching that bartending course, I was not the original teacher. My business partner was. He was the extroverted entertainer. I was the introverted behind the scenes business guy. But I had to overcome my shyness to teach because we were growing so quickly. I was the only other person that could teach the course. So I had to learn very quickly how to stand in front of a group of 100 or 150 people and lecture. We had big classes. It was done in college campuses. It was a lot of fun. But for me, it was sort of a great learning experience. I had no choice but to overcome that fear. But that's when I started reading Tony Robbins. That's what I was listening to at the time, you know, books on tape. I was reading a lot of self-improvement and confidence building books. And the other thing I was doing was practicing my social skills. So as much as I was uncomfortable teaching, I made a sort of intentional effort when we were hosting the classes that we were teaching to introduce myself to the students. So what they didn't see was I was building rapport and I was establishing relationships with them early when they would first come into the class. My business partner would teach and they'd bond with him as the teacher. But then after a week or two, I would jump in and teach. But I've already established a personal relationship with each of them. So it sort of took the fear and anxiety off of my plate and I could focus on what I had to do. So I found a sneaky way, if you will, to kind of get to know people quietly first. And then all of a sudden I wasn't talking to an audience that was judging me. I was talking to people with names that I knew. And it made things a lot easier. Now that's hard to do when you're in a one-shot networking event, right? You're going to a meetup or something like that. But if you now come back to sort of the sort of basic best practices of networking, first and foremost, if and when you're going to network, have a goal. Make sure that you're being deliberate about every interaction, right? So no matter where you go, set a goal for yourself. And I told you, if my goal for this session tonight is to kind of give you an assignment, have something to take away that's valuable. But at a networking event, you know, if you're introverted or very shy, maybe your goal is strictly to go up to 2 people and say hi and hope, you know, where the conversation goes from there. And I'll give you more than just saying hi, but just break the ice. You know, if you do nothing else and you say you've done that, you've made incremental improvement. You know, I say that I run marathons. I shuffle marathons, long distances, but I love using the marathon analogy. And I actually, in using these tools and all this technology that I just showed you at the beginning of this, I've been actually going on to a lot of webinars myself recently and listening to people that have done tremendous work building virtual communities and building membership organizations. And they use the marathon analogy too. The idea is if we look at 26 miles as a goal, it's intimidating. And a lot of people won't even start, or they'll start and they'll get 2 miles into it and say, I can't do 24 more miles. But the fact is, when I go out and run, I'm not running 26 miles. I'm running to that phone pole. I'm running to that next spectator. I'm running to the next, you know, whatever landmark it is. A long distance broken up into segments or steps becomes achievable. And networking is the same way. If you walk in thinking, I have to go to this event because the hiring manager of my dream job is going to be there, you are setting yourself up for failure if you think you're going to walk in there and get a job offer for your dream job. Okay. You'll be lucky if you even interact with that person or if that person even shows up. So the goal should be establish contact with that person. right? And don't try to talk about what you want from them. Understand them first, because you can learn from just a casual social conversation very important information that you can use in a subsequent follow-up to establish a call, to reach out through LinkedIn, or however you're going to follow up with that person. So I think the best advice I can give, especially to shy people, is, again, break it down, or as we say in sports, make it small, right? Don't try to achieve the whole thing at once. The second goal you might want to set for yourself, especially as an introvert, or even if you're extroverted, is to initiate or open a conversation, right? So while meeting somebody might be the goal, go around and practice by meeting other people first. Introduce yourself, explain why you're here. This might be your first time, and just ask a question or two. Try to come up with something that feels comfortable, but that's authentic, right? You don't want to fake anything here, because at the end of the day, you're trying to establish an authentic relationship with people. And the other piece of advice that I like to promote during the network navigation is keep moving. Networking and business, it's a contact sport, literally. Okay, you have to make more contacts for your network to be valuable, right? So if you're in a conversation, sometimes, especially if you're nervous about it, you've established a conversation with somebody and a good rapport, but now you're afraid to move on because you're breaking that one bond, and now you have to form a new one with somebody else. That's scary, right? But again, if your goal for that session is to say, I'm going to do this 2 or 3 times, it's a way to think about, I have to keep moving. And I need a technique maybe to break away from a conversation or to establish a new conversation. And I can give you a couple of tips on that in a second. I just want to kind of get through the list first. And most importantly, after the goal, I think the other G that you think about is giving. What is it that you have to offer? Okay, and that comes back to the listening. As you're listening, make sure you're doing an active job listening, but then think about, well, why would this person want to follow up with me or hear back from me? What do I have to offer them? And it's very common, and I've heard it many times over the years, as college students, you feel like, well, what can I offer somebody who's been in the industry for 20 years? Well, right now I can tell you, you can offer me technological advice. You can probably offer me a lot of skills that I don't know, I'm a Gen Xer. I'm a somewhat tech savvy Gen Xer, but I also know I don't know it all. So the classes you're taking in social media, the way you're interacting in groups, the way you're being taught right now, team exercises, being in the GSA, the skills that you're developing as a network of students are tremendously valuable to older workers, okay? And I think it's important to you don't know that until you get out there, but before COVID hit, it was a seller's market for talent. We were so low in unemployment that people were desperate to find smart, educated people like yourselves to fill jobs and to take things moving forward. Now in the age of COVID, you might be able to take something that you don't even think of as a skill. Your ability to run a Zoom conference could be extremely valuable to somebody that has a flip phone, but runs a successful business, right? So there's so many new opportunities that aren't obvious yet, but don't underestimate the fact that you've got a lot to offer somebody that's much older. So giving is important. And you might not know what you have to give in the moment, but if you enter the networking environment with a giving orientation, as opposed to a taking or getting orientation, I think you'll find it to be a much more valuable and long-term, strong relationship that you're starting to establish. Nobody wants to go into an event and feel like all they want to do is suck a business card out of my pocket and keep moving, right? Sometimes that's all you can do. And that might be one of your goals, right? Is to get the contact information and move on. But don't ever take someone's business card or contact information without an explicit reason, and make sure you honor that reason by following up the way you promise you will follow up when you take that card, right? And it can be as legitimate as to say, look, I saw you were here. I'm very interested in the work that your company does. The truth is I'm between majors right now, and I suspect I want to move into your field. Would you be open down the road? It might be next week. It might be in a year. Would you mind if I followed up and asked you a few questions? Just establish that and get permission to follow up. And if somebody ever said that to me, I would say absolutely. Like there's no reason not to. Most of us want to help. It's as human beings, it's in our nature to want to help other people. And as much as when you're anxious, you don't think that's the case. So you put all these reasons why they don't want to talk to you up there. But the fact is, if we're in the room, we want to help. We want to get to know you. So that's why the mocktail mixers have been so great. I've been talking a lot, so I'm going to pause for a second. Any questions or any thoughts on experiences you might have had that said otherwise, or things that you might have thought about differently? Okay, so one last best practice before jumping back to sort of the takeaway idea is the notion of being curious. I talked about being an active listener and establishing rapport. The best way you can work on both of those things at the same time is be curious. Asking questions is the tool that you use to establish rapport and to initiate somebody else talking, right? Especially if you hate making small talk. My son is being one of them. He got just a terrifying book from my father for Christmas. We talked about the incredible art of small talk, or the lost art of small talk, and he just froze. Like, he hates crowds. But small talk, just social banter is great. You might have a logo on a jersey. Oh, did you go to that school? Or if you're in an office and you're interviewing for a job, or better yet, if you're in, if I didn't have my green screen up right now, you'd see a bookshelf there. And if we were just having a conversation, you might say, Paul, I see you have this on your bookshelf. Can you tell me about that? Or I just read that. It's a great book. It's a way to ask questions, because people like to talk about themselves. And especially in a give and get relationship, if you initiate by being curious, people want to answer those questions, right? So it's a very natural way to establish that rapport. So those are that's sort of a list of best practices. So setting a goal, keeping it moving, making sure that you're giving and not getting all the time, and being curious. I'd say those are sort of the 4 key areas that you want to think about. As far as how to engage and how to relate to people, I'm going to come back to my friend Tony Robbins there for a minute, because one of the other things that he expressed in his sort of psychology of rapport is the concept of matching and mirroring people's movements and gestures, right? So when you're in a conversation with somebody, if somebody's speaking very quietly, it might be hard for you to hear and lean in, but you might be encroaching on their space too much and make them feel uncomfortable. So the part of the challenge of establishing sort of nonverbal rapport with somebody is sometimes doing exactly what they're doing, right? So when I'm talking to somebody, I will pay attention to how people are standing. And I learned this late, but it's very powerful, actually. Like, in business situations, I used to joke, if I ever showed up in a full suit, it meant that I knew nothing about what I was about to talk about, or I felt completely intimidated by the people I was meeting with, because I figured I could at least outdress my fear. And usually the more sort of casual I looked, the more confident I felt, because I feel like, you know what, they need me. It doesn't matter if I'm wearing a sweatshirt or a jacket. But this idea of nonverbal communication, I had the statistic here. I think he said only 7% of our communication is with words. The other 93% of how we connect with people is nonverbal. Now, that's more challenged when we're doing this through a 2-dimensional screen like this. And yet at the same time, I've got each of you in an undivided frame, and I can see your facial expressions. I can tell if you're checking out. I can tell if something's clicking. I can tell if you're thinking. I can tell if you're listening. I can tell if you're daydreaming or multitasking. And that's very powerful, because I can't tell that with pretty much everyone in the room when we're in a physically proximate location. So your ability to read people's engagement and on a web interview or phone interview, even the tone of your voice. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to set it up. I was doing something else before, but with this green screen, I was planning to stand up and actually stand while I was giving this presentation. When I'm talking to somebody about something important to me, I pace. And it drives my family crazy now that we're all sitting in the same household, because I am all over this house on the phone, and it drives them nuts. My son's trying to do an internship. My daughter's still going to classes, and my wife's a nurse. So when she's home, she does not want to be bothered with me. But the idea of movement, people can hear your emotions on the other side of the phone, even if they can't see you. And that's really important, is establishing that. So there are elements of that idea of gestures and eye contact and tone that becomes important to this skill too. So my recommendation to those of you doing interviews in particular, so Mark, when you think about it, are you going to be on a video platform when you do it, or will it be a phone-based interview? And you're muted, so I don't know if you can hear me, Mark. Yeah, you might be baking cookies right now too. So I don't know, maybe it's a picture. So, but it doesn't really matter. I guess the point is, you need to sort of mirror what the other person in your communication is doing, saying, acting. I think because again, the theory that was behind that comment was that people want to be with people that are like themselves or people that are like the way they want to be. Okay, and that's just sort of human nature, that we kind of gravitate towards people that are like ourselves first, or what we aspire to. And the most flattering way to establish a connection with somebody is to sort of mirror how they act, and it does work. It's an interesting sort of principle of that. So I see you again, Mark. I was just curious in terms of the platform. Will you be doing a video interview on Thursday, or will it be on the phone?
It will be a Zoom video interview.
Okay. So
Gonzalez and a few others who currently work it.
So just a personal bias of mine, I would find a static background. I would not use a dynamic background on an interview. I do find it distracting because it's one of those, it is as realistic as it is, it does cut in and out. So if I move quickly, or if I happen to have a piece of green on or something, I know sometimes my collar might look funny. In a professional exchange, unless you have a very simple background that's not going to distract from you, I would personally find a place where you can do the Zoom with just a static, realistic background. I think that's really important. So I see we're coming up on 6 o'clock. So I guess to summarize, think about your channels, right? It's, things haven't changed about LinkedIn. Ramtrack is a way to get in touch with people. Obviously, email is going to be a communication tool. Meetups, if you can find virtual meetups, there are a lot of people that are hanging out doing social things through this medium right now. Practice it, find places where it's non-threatening to you in a non-professional environment where you can actually have these exchanges. So to me, I think it's really important to find that. And again, think about reflecting on sort of the takeaways here, the rapport that you want to establish with somebody. So it might just be one person in the group of 20 that you're talking to, or having this shared experience. Maybe you don't even have a chance to interact in the actual Zoom event, but after the fact, you can say, hey, you asked a great question on that conference the other day. I wanted to follow up with you. Would you mind if I set up a phone call or set up a Zoom with you, right? Nothing would be more flattering than to get an inquiry from somebody that happened to hear what I had to say and found it valuable, right? So these are the things you can do to establish that rapport early on. So my one ask of each of you is to find a way to make a connection right now. Go to LinkedIn, find somebody that you might have been reluctant to ask about, or find somebody that one of us knows that you're going to ask us to make an introduction to. Again, go onto Ramtrack and look at what is out there if you haven't yet. It sounds like most of you are in a good place, at least in terms of next step.
Just one clarification. It's Handshake now.
Sorry, Handshake. Yeah.
Handshake. Okay.
Thank you. Sorry. He didn't tell me. Yeah, it's funny. I've seen you say Handshake on LinkedIn and it didn't register. So, okay, but on Handshake, the point is you have resources now to reach out to people. Don't be afraid to ask for informational interviews too. Tremendous way to network is to say, I don't know if I am remotely interested in what you have to do, but would you be willing to spend a half hour with me to tell me why I should consider it? People do like to talk about what they're doing. And honestly, maybe because we're all zoomed out, people would prefer just having a phone conversation. Ask them how they're comfortable communicating. I've done that now with people that I've reached out to, because so many people insist on doing things by video right now. It's exhausting because you have to be on. Right? I mean, this is a very tiring exercise. You guys have had the worst of it because you're sitting there listening to me yak for 60 minutes, but normally there's a give and take. But the more you do that throughout the day, it gets hard. So think about, joining a virtual event, reaching out to a professional, hopping on LinkedIn. Do something right now to add to your network, whether it's a direct contact or an indirect contact. And if you make a habit of that, do it once a week. You'll have 50 new contacts by the end of the year. That's tremendous. So I'll just wrap here, I guess, and ask if there are any questions or if there's anything in particular I can be helpful with. So yeah, Dennis.
So I know you mentioned about the whole logo thing. That's one thing I've realized has been very helpful in trying to build my network. So you know how here everyone's like a Patriots fan. So when I was in DC last semester, I had a keychain like, or an ID chain of Patriots gear. So like I was at the lunch line, some guy would come up with me, "Oh, you're a Patriots fan." So because there's like a love and hate relationship with the Patriots.
That's right.
So like basically every day I met someone through that little keychain symbol just because I was a Patriots fan. Like I'll go to like a lunch line. This kid came up to me. I was kind of zoned out because I was just ready to eat. I was just ready to get my food. And he goes, "Oh, I'm from Massachusetts." And I just kind of like walked out. I was like, "Wait, what?" Then just little symbol kind of every day I kind of found a network opportunity with someone. So yeah, I really loved how you mentioned that because it's helped me kind of like a conversation starter at work. I have built more relationship with other people because I'm a Patriots fan. Like people come up to me on Monday morning, it's like, "Hey, did you see Brady, how he performed?" Like all those little things. And from that, like through that, I've kind of like got more conversation out of them, or they've got more conversation out of me through that little, Patriots gear.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And it just, Maddie, before we get to you,
Yeah.
as follow up to your specific, your specific challenge, Dennis. I think as you think about how do you stay engaged with your network, the fact is, what matters most is that people remember when and how they interacted with you. It's entirely possible you don't touch them for a year or two, right? I mean, we talk about this idea of a touch point every few months, but a lot of people in your network, frankly, I don't know most of the people in my LinkedIn. My rule with LinkedIn, the problem I've had is I've been in politics, I've been teaching, and I've been in business. I've got so many ways of meeting people that it got exhausting trying to literally pick up the phone and try to get to know everybody. But my rule is if you're linked in with me, and even if I don't know you, if somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, I want to meet this person," and they're in my contacts, I'm reaching out to them, even if I don't know them. So it actually helps me establish a connection. The tool itself was really built to build a tight group of people, but it became, like so many other things in social networking, this explosion of contacts. So now it's more important to have more people than more quality people. To some, quality matters more. But your I guess question about how should you be following up with people, the best advice I can give you is just keep it natural. If you have no reason to be in touch with them, then don't fabricate one, right? But COVID's a good example. Like the fact is, putting something in that shows people you're thinking about them, it's nice. It's just a nice gesture. People used to write cards to each other at the holidays, right? We used to stay in touch with people in very different ways. So if your one goal of networking is to make sure you touch a contact in some way, shape, or form, whether it's an email, sharing an article like you mentioned, or just to check in and just say, "Hey, I was thinking about that event we went to," or "I went to an event today that reminded me of that event where we met," something that I saw something new. Just a reason to keep in mind. Because the goal for networking, for when you do want to make that ask of somebody, is you want to be at the top of mind to them. And the best way you can stay top of mind is to stay in front of them. But it doesn't have to be unnaturally in front of them. Like nobody wants to keep getting pushed articles. It's the last thing I'm looking at in my inbox, right, from people. But yeah, if somebody I happen to interact with said, "Hey, yeah, I knew you were a diehard Red Sox fan, and I saw this really funny documentary the other day. I thought you might be interested." That's cool. So go ahead, Maddie.
Sure. So you had mentioned earlier, I know when I did Suitable Solutions last year and did some networking there. And I think my biggest difficulty was both breaking in and breaking away from the conversation. So do you have any like tips or tricks besides, just walking up and saying, "Hi, my name is," or like you had mentioned before, sometimes if a conversation's going nowhere, you might want to be able to walk away from it. So what are some tips to respectfully do that where it doesn't, diminish the work that you just did connecting with that person?
Right. Well, I think there's two things you can do. One way is to just basically take permission to take control of your own time. Just saying, "Look, this has been great. I would love to follow up with you at another time. My goal for tonight, I wanted to talk to 5 or 6 different people, and I just want to be sensitive to the time to meet some other people as I do that. So let's definitely follow up. But in the meantime, I'm going to go check out some people over here, or go talk to this person, or what have you." That's one way to do it. Is in a networking specific event, it's easier because you have permission to break away. In a social event, it's a little trickier. What I found is sometimes if you've gotten stuck in a conversation and you want to kind of break away respectfully, you might want to excuse yourself to go use the bathroom. You might want to go get some food or refresh a drink. Or if there's somebody else in the group, and not to hand off the person, but truly trying to help the person by making a different connection, you know, if you feel like you've kind of exhausted the conversation, but you picked something up from this person, say, you know, you said you were interested in, well, I'll use Framingham State as the example. You know, it sounds like you're majoring in math. I know there were 3 other people from the MathWorks here. Let me go see if I can find somebody. And if I know you're in this general area, I'll steer them over here. And that's just sort of another way to sort of say, look, I'm going to try to help you, but I can do that best by stopping this conversation. Right. And again, it's respectful, but at the same time, it gives you permission to break away. You know, this simple stuff is hard. It's the golden rule. Treat people the way you want to be treated. But I do think there's this natural, you know, networking's like dating too, right? It's okay to hit a natural ending point, right? This just isn't working out. Like, or I've gotten from this exchange more than I need to, or enough of what I can, and I'm moving on.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for that. That's a good advice. I like the bathroom. Refresh a drink.
Yeah, everybody's got to go, right? Nobody can fault you for that. So.
I actually have a question too.
Sure. Ask each other, by the way. Like, the fact that I'm talking a lot here too, but don't discount the fact that a lot of the value could be your peers. But go ahead, Olivia.
So I guess this is for anyone then. But so this past semester and this past year, this past semester I was actually interning at the State House for a representative. And I'm also on the Board of Trustees. So I constantly find myself in positions, especially at the State House too, not just in the Board of Trustees, where the people I'm in the room with have a wealth of more knowledge than me about, you know, certain things, a wealth of more knowledge about life and all that stuff. And I'm consistently in a room with people who I feel like are much like older and wiser than me in that sense, in terms of like career stuff and just they know what they're doing. I'm wondering if there's like any tips or tricks that you have in terms of becoming comfortable with that kind of thing, because I've noticed through my internship that half of politics is just solely handshaking and introducing yourself and
not following through.
Exactly. And I'm trying to find ways to feel more comfortable when, you know, everyone's talking about a certain bill or a tort bill or something and I have no clue what they're talking about. Like, I'm trying to find ways to be more comfortable with the unknown of certain things, I guess.
Are you working with Rep Lewis, or who are you working
with?
No,
I'm working under Rep Roy. So actually same office as Rep Lewis. He's the chair of the Department of Higher Education. But yeah, a lot of what I was doing was going to different events and whatnot, briefings. So I'm always around a lot of different people, but a lot of times I was just very nervous about introducing myself.
All right, I'm gonna give you one silver bullet answer that's like the perfect thing to calm you down. Don't confuse being older with being wiser. All right. Unfortunately, you know, my experience has been reporters and politicians, and I was an elected selectman in Natick, so I've been through a little bit of a political process, and I'm connected with a lot of our representative delegation here because of my work at the Chamber of Commerce. We're very lucky. We've got great legislators, and we get a lot of great support from the legislative body that we've got. But don't forget, these people are people that have come at this job because something pulled them into it. Karen Spilka got involved because she was an engaged school committee member. Now she's the president of the Senate, right? But she's a social worker by training, yet she has credentials as running the economic development, initiatives of the state. So their wisdom, their experience is real, but it's also gained along a path that they've taken that, frankly, I use the phrase about myself too. I can be an inch deep and a mile wide. So if you throw me into a room, I guarantee you I could probably have an interesting conversation with every single person in the room. And I'm generally shy. So for me to make that bold statement says something because I'm experienced at it. But I'm also not afraid to ask questions, you know, or bring something completely that seems unrelated into the conversation. Now, as working as an intern, listening to some of this stuff, it's a great opportunity to say, oh, you know, I heard you mention something in that meeting, you know, can we talk about it further down the road? Or, you know, is there a way we can follow up? You might, in the moment, might not be the best time to do it. That might be your moment to be an active listener. If they ask for your opinion on something, or, you know, that's the question, like, do you need to be interjecting into the conversation, or should you just be absorbing at that point? But there is absolutely a time to reflect whatever you're absorbing. Okay. And I think that's really important to your professional development and your personal development, is to let Representative Roy know you were listening in there. And even if you didn't understand what was going on, you were aware enough because of your acute listening to ask what you don't know. And as somebody that I'm employing, that's an incredibly valuable trait, because I want somebody who's committed to learning, so I don't have to keep doing it over and over again at some point. So, you might ask your supervisor, in this case, the representative or a staffer, how can I be most helpful to the team in this meeting? Ask them for what you should be doing or what you should be focused on. Or sometimes, and I've used this now since I've left the Chamber of Commerce and I've left politics. I've actually been very actively involved in Natick politics since I've been back, but I refer to myself as blissfully detached. I have no official title whatsoever. So what I tell people is, if you need somebody to say something that's politically sensitive, or if you need somebody to ask a dumb question in public, I'll do it for you. I got nothing to lose. I don't represent anything but myself, but I can help a friend who's in a position of power. You're very powerful because you can ask. There used to be a show on in the 70s called Columbo. He was a detective, and he always would act dumb in his interviews with people, and he'd walk out of the room and he'd say, oh, wait, there's just one more thing. And he'd ask that one question. You could be that person to help the representative get more information out by asking the dumb question, or to introduce something that might be politically delicate for them to introduce, but you can just do it as the ignorant, volunteer, the ignorant intern, right? So there's a lot of ways. That's extremely valuable in politics too, because it's of no fault to the politician that you're asking that question, right? So there are things you can do, I think, along the way, but I would encourage you to be, start with active listening and think about what your role should be in that meeting. And ask, because you can probably help them in ways you haven't even thought about yet.
I'll add, my dad's an engineer and has done defense contracting for going on 35 years now, and he works at the Natick Army Labs. And I talked to him a lot about networking, and he understands the importance of it. And he's been a real mentor for me in the ability to connect and at times push me to kind of go outside my comfort zone. And he always says with, the younger engineers that they onboard, he always gravitates towards those that like kind of ask questions, because he's naturally inquisitive, like myself. So I know that I've definitely been kind of probably in the same rooms as you, Olivia, with some people that are talking about, certain things that are happening with, the state higher educational system. And I have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. And I found that, if I just say, hold on, do you mind explaining that to me? They're kind of thrilled, because now they get the chance to kind of put some of their knowledge with you.
Definitely. Thank you. I have to go cook dinner, so I'm going to be heading out. But
Classic politician. You got what you wanted and you're leaving.
Maddie, could you just bring it home about how much we appreciate Paul?
Oh, I know. I can't thank you enough for coming on here. And I remember myself at the mocktail mixer last year, kind of off in the background and soaking in all of your words of wisdom and the great exercise that you did. So I want to thank you for spending an evening with us and giving you some of your knowledge. And I'm also, I found it, it's those kind of small connections that you're talking about. I'm also a Natick resident, so I find it funny when there's like those little things you can connect on. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Yeah, and anytime. So again, if the one thing you do tonight, if you want to reach out on LinkedIn, I'm happy to link with you guys. But good luck moving forward, especially the seniors, as you're going out into the great unknown, but we're all in it together. And as the rest of you progress throughout your years at Framingham State, I can't talk more highly about the team with Wendy and Dawn and everybody that's there to help support you on this trajectory. So good luck to everybody.
Thank you.